Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. Dozens rallied on the steps of the Manitoba legislature this past week, hoping to pressure the provincial government to move forward with a landfill search for the remains of missing women in Winnipeg. APTN's Leanne Sanders reports.
The crowd gathered in support of the families of Mercedes Myron and Morgan Harris. Carrying signs and hand drums, they demanded justice for the women whose remains are believed to be in the Prairie Green landfill, victims of an alleged serial killer. This supporter says the ongoing genocide of Indigenous women has to stop.
Individual acts are genocide when they're all happening to the same group.
Weeks after a feasibility study said it was possible to search, no plans have been announced. Long Plain First Nation Chief Kyra Wilson said there are tentative plans for a meeting in July with the provincial government, but she hasn't confirmed yet. She says the issue keeps getting shuffled back and forth between the provincial and federal governments. She says the federal government has told them it wants to support them in a search, but is waiting on the province.
So for me, this is not a political issue. This is, an issue that speaks to humanity and who we are as a community, as a society. And if you're not willing to do that landfill search, and if you're not willing to do that work in your role as a leader, then somebody else needs to be sitting there.
Cambria Harris, the daughter of one of the women whose remains are believed to be in the landfill, urged those gathered to keep putting pressure on government and to keep talking about the issue of missing and murdered women.
Acknowledge what is happening and continue to talk about it with your peers at your dinner table. When you go home today, don't let this be just a one-time conversation. Make this an everyday conversation. Because if it's uncomfortable for you to speak about, could you imagine how uncomfortable it is for our Indigenous community to have to live through every single day?
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The first ground search at a former residential school site in the Yukon has begun. As the community continues to grapple with the legacy of the school, many are hoping the search will yield answers and healing. Here's Sarah Connors with that story.
With every tedious, painstaking movement, families of missing residential school children may be one step closer to learning what happened to their loved ones.
And a lot of their children did not come back home. They have no idea what ever happened to their children.
While the site of the former Chutla Indian Residential School in Carcross, Yukon, has since returned to earth, its reputation of abuse and brutality continues to haunt the community and the territory. With two schools operating from 1911 to 1969, the Yukon Residential School's Missing Children Working Group estimates as many as 42 students died here.
It feels good to finally have it come to rest and to put it behind us.
For the community's chief, closure is needed for families who have been searching for answers for decades, but that also comes with mixed feelings.
Some people are anxious to find out, and some more people are not sure what to do. If they do find something, then what to do then.
The search will use ground-penetrating radar and a magnetometer to collect data and locate potential grave sites. While it's not happy work for lead surveyor Peter Tokic, it's work that must be done.
We feel the weight of the work, and we really hope that we can bring those closures. But on the other hand, we have to focus on our job to do it correctly, to do it in the right way.
With over $1 million in funding from the territorial and federal governments, the plan is to continue searches in other communities across the territory in the years to come. While it will take time to uncover the secrets that may be buried here, the ultimate hope is this work will eventually lead to healing.
It's going to find peace. It's going to help with closure of people that have gone through the residential school.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Carcross.
The second annual Walk for Missing and Murdered Men and Boys was held in Vancouver recently. And as APTN's Tina House reports, there are many families still waiting wanting answers about what happened to their missing loved ones.
Close to 100 people gathered outside of the Vancouver police station to raise awareness about murdered and missing men and boys, including family members, babies, and furry friends. For event organizer Curtis Ahenakew, he says the issue is personal to him, as he lost many close friends over the years.
In the last 20 years, there's been 100 men murdered, shot by police in Canada, and there's been no justice to that. But on a whole, across the nation, the stats for men is way higher than missing and murdered women. But we are here as men and supporters because of the leadership of women, the missing and murdered Indigenous women. We are here. We're following their lead. That's why we're here, to honor our sisters too.
And with the big drum leading the marchers, they began their walk across the Cambie Street Bridge. And with each step, everyone here is remembering a lost loved one and are demanding answers about what happened to so many missing and murdered men and boys across Canada. For Carl Schooner and his family, they traveled to Vancouver from Bella Coola, BC, to raise awareness about their missing son, Carl Schooner Jr. He has been missing for over 6 months and was last seen in Williams Lake, BC. It's still an open investigation at this point, but there's a $10,000 reward for any information about his disappearance. Carl Sr. says his son got involved with a bad crowd, and all he wanted to do was come home.
And he got involved with the drugs and the people up there, and I was supposed to pick him up Friday, and Sunday I got up there, and I tried to message him, and that's the last time we'd last spoke with him, and we've never heard from him since.
He says the feeling of guilt he has is overwhelming.
He wanted to come home so bad that I wish I went up Friday.
For Alicia Williams and her mom Eugenia, they are here to raise awareness about their brother and son, 26-year-old Charles Udi. In 2015, after a night of drinking with friends, he was found headfirst in this storm drain in East Vancouver. Police ruled it an accident after his cell phone was found in the storm drain, and believe he fell in after trying to retrieve the phone. But his family doesn't believe that explanation.
Nothing really adds up, and we've been fighting for him to be recognized, because we don't believe it's an accident like VPD always say about our Indigenous people, that even when nothing adds up, it's an accident, so he brings us here today, and we're happy that we're here for the second year and for the missing Indigenous men and boys.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Some First Nations police services in Ontario are getting close to not being able to make their payroll. That story and more coming up after the break. Welcome back to APTN National News Weekend. In northwestern Ontario, it's been 5 years since an Anishinaabe teen was killed in her community. After years of a publication ban, her family is speaking out to keep her story alive. And they say the killer was her next-door neighbor. Tamara Pimentel has more.
When something shines so bright, such as a mirror or a diamond, it shatters. That's the only way I can describe it. It's what I feel and have to carry. And that mirror will never shine the way it once did. Because I carried her, I gave her life. I breastfed her, and she was stolen from me. And a part of me, I feel like a part of me is gone.
Autumn Andy was 15 years old when she was killed in her home community of Big Grassy River First Nation 5 years ago.
I remember this day.
As her mother Angeline and her auntie Gina Andy go through photos, they talk about Autumn's love for the land and cotton candy clouds over Lake of the Woods. Eating wild food and drinking cedar tea were her favorite.
She loved being outdoors. She loved camping. She loved swimming. She loved golfing. She really loved hunting and fishing and trapping. She enjoyed walking this earth. She enjoyed walking on Mother Earth.
I always called her baby girl. She was just like my daughter. Even when I think of it, she's like my granddaughter, like my first granddaughter. That's how I see Autumn.
A publication ban kept Angeline silent for years. Now she wants to tell her daughter's story. Autumn was last seen June 10, 2018. 3 days later, her body was found near the grounds of Pegmagabu School.
So there is camera surveillance on the top corner here.
Angeline says everything was caught on these security cameras, where it appeared Autumn was abducted.
In this area here, there was earth taken. There was DNA in this area, why that earth was taken.
DNA evidence suggests Autumn Andy was sexually abused and suffered many injuries, including brain trauma. Daryl Tuesday Willie was charged in connection with her death. He was 24 at the time. According to court documents, in June 2019, Tuesday Willie was charged with 4 counts, including first-degree murder, sexual assault, improperly interfering with human remains, and confinement. He initially pleaded not guilty on all 4 counts in August 2021, then later guilty to the lesser included offense of second-degree murder and improperly interfering with human remains. He was sentenced to life in prison, not eligible for parole for 13 years, while concurrently serving 2 years for improperly interfering with human remains. Angeline says Autumn and her killer were known to each other. He was once her neighbor in a townhouse complex on Reserve, where she still resides today.
He was hiding on the other side of the walls of our apartment after what he did to Autumn. He lived there for about a year after we moved in, but at the time of Autumn's death, he did not live there. I didn't know how to accept. I felt I had to suppress, partly because of the publication ban, and that's been such a struggle, and to this day it's still a struggle to keep my composure, to be humble, and still on that packed trail.
Angeline says she rarely steps foot behind the school grounds. This is where she believes Autumn was covered in a blanket and tree branches in June 2018. Autumn would have been 20 years old next week. In honor of her, Angeline joined the Big Grassy River First Response Team and has been taking self-defense classes with her 7-year-old daughter, Elena. She encourages other women to do the same.
None of the young girls and women deserve that. I don't deserve to live this life the way I have to continue the person I want to be, who she helped me to be, who Autumn helped me to be. I love you, Autumn. I love you, my baby. Well, I offered tobacco to the water for a baby girl. I prayed to the water for a baby girl. She was so special to me. The Creator gave her to me, and she was taken from me in the end. She didn't deserve what happened to her.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Big Grassy River First Nation.
First Nations policing services in Ontario are in a state of crisis. 3 Indigenous police chiefs joined NDP MPs on Parliament Hill on Monday, calling for immediate action. Here's Annette Francis with more.
Thank you very much.
NDP MP Carol Hughes said there's grave concerns over policing in 45 First Nations. The call for action is in response to the federal government not renewing a policing contract on March 31st.
This is leaving more than 30,000 people in those Indigenous communities without police service. And it will leave them without police service come the end of June, because that's when the funding that they've been using up is going to expire.
Lawyer Julian Faulkner says with no contract, policing services are now running on fumes. He claims that negotiations to renew the contract failed because specialized policing is not being considered for funding.
They're prohibited from having police services that have basic police units, like a domestic assault unit, like a homicide unit, like an emergency response team. They're prohibited from having that.
Kai Liu of the Treaty 3 Police Services says the drug abuse, domestic violence, and a continued suicide crisis will not stop if the services cease to exist. He says it's imperative that negotiations get back on track.
June 5th, the Treaty 3 Police Service issued our last paycheck, or paychecks, to our members based on the funds we have in our bank. Right now, we have no funds left. And so we are living on a line of credit. And for those that have lines of credits, you know there's a limit.
Indigenous Chiefs of Police of Ontario.
NDP MP Lori Udelut brought up the issue during question period on Monday. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino responded.
That I've had constructive discussions with Chief Kai Liu over the course of the weekend, and I want to assure all members in this chamber that we are committed to resolving this situation as quickly and as respectfully as we can.
Faulkner says the matter will go to the federal court this week, seeking an injunction to get emergency funding from the federal government. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
A judge in Montreal ruled the people living under the Ville-Marie Expressway need to leave by June 15th, so the Ministry of Transportation's construction work can proceed. But plans for an appeal are underway. Resilience Montreal, an Indigenous homeless organization, announced they are appealing the eviction order with the help of a mobile legal clinic to let people stay under the bridge for another month. Resilience says half of the people at the homeless camp, some of whom are Indigenous, are 2 to 3 months away from getting long-term affordable housing. Nukaset says evicting them will eliminate their sense of community safety and make it harder for Resilience to reach them.
I don't think it's a lot to ask in a city that says that they don't leave anyone behind. I'm afraid that come the end of the week, there will be a group that's left behind, and it is going to be harder for Resilience to follow up.
A Stanley Cup win for the Sioux Valley Dakota Nation. That story and more coming up after the break. Welcome back to APTN National News Weekend. In preparation for the North American Indigenous Games coming to Halifax this July, the Museum of Natural History in Halifax has a new exhibit. It consists of Migma artifacts from the Nova Scotia Museum and private collectors. Migma curator Roger Lewis took APTN on a tour.
The name of this new exhibit of Migma artifacts is Gezi de Dazigal. It means they are cherished in Migma. It is the largest collection of Migma artifacts at the Museum of Natural History to showcase Migma culture during the North American Indigenous Games. These stone tools are about 6,000 years old. Roger Lewis of the Sabaganagati First Nation is a curator of cultural heritage at the Nova Scotia Museum. He says the collection educates the public about Migma culture.
The early technology, skills, and cultural intelligences of Migma people in the past, and not only see those, this collection represents those cultural intelligence that progressed up to contemporary time. And
Lewis says the exhibit showcases Migma intelligence and resiliency.
I would challenge anybody today to try to make any one of these tools.
Some of the collections are from private donors. They loved Migma art and made donations to the museum for the public to enjoy. Lewis says sharing the collections is important to the Migma community.
Is to get this back on display, sharing some of that traditional kind of knowledge of the makers, etc., with the community. And
one notable display is this wood table. It is the only known piece of Migma furniture that survived the 1917 Halifax explosion.
I think it's relevant and important. It's the only surviving piece of furniture or art material from that otherwise destroyed community.
Another collection includes Migma wood carver Louis Jeremy. He carved household items to trade, barter, and sell.
We'd like to promote him for what he is, a prolific folk artist.
As the exhibit continues, each area is a different collection throughout time. Stone technology, basketry, wood carvings, and wood flowers.
And I think the message again is the vibrancy, the resilience, the sustainability of Migma culture, Migma art. It's still just as beautiful.
The exhibit ends with a piece by Jordan Bennett, a Migma visual artist. Known for his contemporary art, Lewis says Bennett's piece is a cultural statement.
To see our young artists incorporating the cultural material of ancestors into something very new is really refreshing and exciting.
Gezi Day Daziga is on display at the museum until the end of November. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabuktuk, also known as Halifax.
There is a new Stanley Cup champion. The Vegas Golden Knights defeated the Florida Panthers to take the series in 5 games and win the franchise's first Stanley Cup. Playing a key role on that winning team was defenseman Zach Whitecloud. Whitecloud hails from the Sioux Valley Dakota Nation in western Manitoba. He becomes one of just a handful of Indigenous players to win the Stanley Cup. Whitecloud shared some emotional words following the win.
Thank you for the support, the unwavering support consistently. As you know, I've gone throughout hockey in my travels, and I'm thankful for everyone at home for following along and being a part of the journey. No, just proud of my heritage, proud of my culture, and proud of where I come from.
Congrats to Zach and the Golden Knights. It's going to be a big day, I'm sure, in Sioux Valley for that. Next year, it's the Leafs' turn. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this weekend. You can find much more over on our website, aptnnews.ca. And it is a big weekend this weekend. If you get a chance, Saturday, tune in or be there live for Indigenous Day Live. And on Sunday night, the Inspire Awards. That's all for us. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Have a great weekend.